Imagine this. You're playing Assassin's Creed 4, moving through cities and actually enjoying everything the game throws at you. But at the same time, you run into a group of enemies. What do you do in that situation? Do you take them head on, drop a smoke bomb and disappear, or throw random ass coins at them? Exactly, that's the point of this video. Because not just AC4 but almost every Assassin's Creed game has at least one skill so useless you completely forget it even exists.
Bruh.
So let's take a look at some of the most useless skills in Assassin's Creed. Altair had many skills and tools in his arsenal that made him stand out. The game offered a variety of abilities that unlocked as you progressed, but this one in particular is something I completely forgot about, and I'm referring to the gentle push mechanic. In AC1, you learn it very early on, and it's supposed to help you move through crowds without attracting attention. The concept is good, but it isn't actively promoted, and in many cases, it's also useless. The game already offers you a blend feature, letting you move with monks and walk straight into restricted areas. That's one thing. But even when moving through crowds, this mechanic feels so bad that it becomes clunky to use. In both high profile and low profile, it just doesn't stick. It breaks your momentum, and in some cases, even after using it, you fall. And instead of just wasting time awkwardly shoving people, you can just climb up to the nearest rooftop and continue your flow. Need more evidence? The fact that almost 90% of you didn't even think about it until I mentioned it says everything about how useless it really is. This one also has a gentle push as mentioned earlier, but nah, we won't waste your time with the same thing again. Instead, there's another feature that was actually meant to be used in combat. It's the ability to throw sand. Unlocked a bit later when Ezio meets his uncle and reaches the villa, he teaches you about the assassins, the Templars, and the skills of becoming one. And during those training sessions, the game introduces this mechanic that's supposedly meant to give you an upper edge. But it does the opposite. The time Ezio takes to pick up the sand and throw it is even more than a second. And in combat, that's a liability. Even when it works like a charm, but the cooldown is insane. Agile guards hit you in less than a second, and if you're doing this instead of dodging or countering, you're 100% screwed. And it gets even worse when you're surrounded by multiple enemies, because at that point, a handful of sand isn't saving you in any way. Brotherhood offered many improvements to the already refined gameplay of AC2. Those included ranged weapons like the crossbow and the hidden gun, and both of them offered faster aiming and improved reload times. But apparently that still wasn't enough, because they decided to add one more feature that made almost zero sense: the ability to throw your heavy weapon. To explain this, once you kill an enemy, you can pick up their weapon, fight with it for a bit, and then ultimately throw it. Think about that for a second. You have the most advanced arsenal in Renaissance Italy, including one of the earliest firearms, yet you still waste time picking up a heavy weapon just to throw it, which is in fact 10 times slower than a regular ranged attack. I seriously don't understand the need to add this, aside from aura farming, which to be fair is what Ezio did for 90% of the game. In short, it's a feature that wasn't needed at all and only makes sense if you have plenty of time to mess around. With the limited number of upgrades it could have added, it still did the best with what it had. The useless feature here is one that took me more than 3 replays to fully understand. It's the mechanic to craft bombs. It seemed interesting at first, but it's way too complex. You have to experiment to figure out what each bomb does, and then you have to craft it yourself. 3 variations would have been fine, but here you're basically turning Ezio into a chemist, creating hybrid bombs with different combinations. All those bomb types were useful for completing guild challenges, so there was some purpose to the mechanic, but in general gameplay, you don't have to pick the perfect bomb in the heat of the moment, because your only focus is to kill and move on. And honestly, even Ezio wouldn't have used them that often, aside from the good old trusty smoke bombs. As it is the case with Assassin's Creed Revelations and Brotherhood, 3 also introduced plenty of new features, and most of them were lackluster. One such feature was the ability to use bait and snare. In one of the missions where we first play as teenage Connor, I think it's the only time when we use this feature. Or if we minus that and focus on the completionists, then they use this feature when completing some frontiersman challenges or hunting challenges. And aside from these, I don't think I have ever used this feature in my entire life while playing Assassin's Creed 3. Because it's boring, it's repetitive, and it doesn't add anything aside from increasing your playtime. And I don't know what they were thinking while adding this, because it doesn't add much to anything. This one's no surprise, we already talked about it in the intro. No wonder Black Flag is so popular, that's probably why Ubisoft decided to remake it instead of AC1. But even GOATs have their negatives, ones that usually get compensated in other ways. As I mentioned, the worst and most useless feature is the ability to throw coins to distract people. To be fair, it offers nothing but a complete waste of time. A far better alternative is to hide in foliage, whistle to attract guards, and slip past them. And this wasn't only present in AC4, it existed in the classic game started with AC2, and I didn't mention those earlier for obvious reasons. The best use case is attracting crowds just to pickpocket them, but using it to distract guards from their posts and perform effective stealth is simply not practical. Because not only does the animation suck, the mechanic itself just sucks more. Since Rogue was built on the exact same engine as Black Flag, it carried over a lot of the same mechanics, both the good and the bad. But because Shay's a Templar, they decided to give him a much more advanced arsenal to fit his new role. He gets an air rifle, basically a silent sniper, and later even an actual grenade launcher, but mixed in with all these high-tech overpowered tools is the firecracker dart. The game introduces it as a tactical option. You shoot it at a wall, it makes a loud popping noise, and it distracts a group of guards so you can slip by unnoticed. Sounds decent enough, right? But in reality, it's completely redundant. Just like the coins in Black Flag, you're wasting valuable ammo and time setting up a distraction when you already have a free, unlimited whistle that pulls guards straight into a stalking zone for an instant kill. And if you're already aiming your rifle at a guard, why would you ever shoot a firecracker near him when you can just use a sleep dart and remove the threat entirely? It's a mechanic that tries to force you into a distraction-based playstyle, but when your character is already a walking armory, stopping to use a glorified sparkler feels completely pointless. Unity brought a massive change to the franchise, giving us arguably the best parkour system and densest crowds we had ever seen. It completely revamped both stealth and combat, but with those new mechanics came new ways to absolutely waste your skill points. And the biggest offender here is the disguise skill. To unlock it, you actually have to spend valuable co-op sync points, and the idea is that Arno can disguise himself as an enemy guard, letting you walk past checkpoints and into restricted areas. Sounds like the ultimate stealth tool, right? Except the reality is a complete joke. First of all, the disguise timer is painfully short and you barely get enough time to cross a courtyard. But worse than that, the disguise is far more fragile than glass. If you walk slightly fast, it breaks. And suddenly the entire Paris is there to stab you. It takes a game that grounded itself in relatively realistic social stealth and injects a clunky magical morphing ability that barely functions. Because in a world where you already have thousands of civilians to seamlessly blend with and one of the smoothest parkour systems ever made, to go over the guards entirely, spending points to dress up as a guard for 4 seconds feels completely pointless to me. Both Jacob and Evie had their own unique skill trees, but they shared an arsenal of gadgets built for the more modern setting. Among these gadgets is one I guarantee almost nobody used outside of the mandatory tutorial, the Voltaic Bomb. The idea behind it is simple. An early electrocution grenade, you throw it into a group of Blighters or Templars, it stuns them and deals a bit of damage over time. It's meant to be your ultimate crowd control tool, but here's the obvious problem. Jacob and Evie are basically Terminators. Why in the actual f would you throw a loud flashy grenade just to temporarily stun a guard when you can just use a throwing knife? In Syndicate, if you don't know, throwing knives are absurdly overpowered. Fully upgraded, they silently one-shot almost any enemy in the game and you can clear entire rooms in seconds without making a sound. So you're left with a choice. Permanently eliminate a threat from a distance, or throw a noisy spark plug at their feet that mildly annoys them for 5 seconds before you still have to walk up and finish the job anyway. It's a classic case of adding a gadget just for the sake of variety, only for it to become completely obsolete the moment you realize how broken the rest of your arsenal already is. Origins changed everything. It took the franchise into full-blown RPG territory, giving Bayek a massive open world, a revamped hitbox-based combat system, and a sprawling skill tree filled with brand new abilities. And tucked away in that skill tree is an ability that sounds like an absolute dream on paper. The animal taming skill. The game sells it like the ultimate power fantasy. You use a sleep dart on an alpha predator, a lion, a leopard, even a crocodile, and then tame it to fight alongside you. Having a giant hippo as your personal bodyguard sounds incredible, right? It's all fun in games until you actually use it. First up, the AI for these animals is awful. They constantly get in your way, block doorways, and shove you around while you're just trying to loot chests. But the real problem is how it completely ruins stealth. If you're trying to clear out a fort quietly, your petted lion will happily wander straight into a guard's line of sight and blow your cover instantly. And when a real fight breaks out, your supposedly terrifying beast gets melted in about 5 seconds by a single fort captain or a couple of archers. To make matters worse, if you fast travel or reload your game, the animal just disappears. Poof, it's gone. So in the end, you spend a valuable skill point, burn through sleep darts, and hunt down an alpha predator for a temporary clumsy mascot that gets spotted and dies almost instantly. Odyssey took the RPG mechanics of Origins and cranked them up to 11. You're no longer just an assassin, you're a literal Spartan demigod who takes no fall damage, wields magic spear abilities, and fights mythical creatures. The game gives you absolute powerhouse abilities to match that fantasy, but sitting right there in the assassin skill tree is an ability that completely contradicts the entire point of the game, the Vanish skill. The concept is simple. You slam your spear into the ground, creating a bright flash of light that stuns nearby enemies for about 5 seconds, giving you a chance to run away and hide. Sounds like a classic old school assassin escape tool, right? Like a magical smoke bomb? But here's the problem, lads. Why on earth would you ever run away in Odyssey? Well, knowing the fact that the enemies will chase you no matter what. You're a one-person army, and more importantly, using Vanish costs a segment of adrenaline, the exact same resource you use for devastating abilities like Hero Strike, which can nearly one-shot enemies or overpower attacks that wipe out entire groups. So the game asks you to make a choice. Spend your hard-earned adrenaline to flashbang a few guards and run into a bush, or spend that same adrenaline to instantly delete them and move on with your life. In a game that aggressively pushes you to play as an unstoppable Spartan warrior, a skill designed purely for retreat ends up feeling completely out of place and ultimately useless. Valhalla moved the series away from the sunny Mediterranean into the brutal, muddy landscapes of Viking Age England. You play as Eivor, a raider meant to sit at the center of the chaos, leading massive sieges and engaging in high-octane combat. But even in a game built for warriors, there's one ability so awkward that it completely kills the momentum of a Viking raid. Behold, the Feign Death ability. The idea is exactly what it sounds like. In the heat of the battle, Eivor can literally drop to the floor and play dead, tricking enemies into thinking they won so they could walk away. Think about that for a second. You're a legendary Viking leader covered in heavy armor, wielding 2 massive axes, and you've just charged into a monastery to burn it to the ground. And your solution to all of this chaos is to lie down and have a nap? Seriously? What? The problem isn't that it just feels out of character, it's that Valhalla's combat system is built around constant momentum. You've got a system that lets you throw multiple axes at once. And instead of spending your adrenaline into something useful, you spend it into an ability that doesn't even give you the same amount of results and breaks your flow. I'm sorry, but I'm out. Because if you're in trouble, the game already gives you far better options like healing, parries, stuns, or straight up aggression. And using this, it doesn't make any sense. Mirage was marketed as a return to the roots for the franchise, bringing back social stealth, investigation, and a glass cannon approach to open combat. It's a game where every move is supposed to be calculated, but even with a much smaller, more refined skill tree, there's one node that completely misses the mark, and that's the kickback skill. The description says that after a successful parry, Basim can strike and push an enemy away, and on paper, it sounds like a solid way to manage crowds and create breathing room. But here's how Mirage actually plays. If you land a clean parry against a standard guard, the game almost always gives you a prompt for an instant one-hit assassination. So you're faced with 2 choices. Option A. Press a button and instantly delete the enemy from existence. Clean and efficient. Option B. Spend precious stamina to kick them 3 feet away so they can come right back into the fight 5 seconds later. Now, why in your right mind would you ever choose to keep an enemy alive when the game is literally giving you an option to kill them right there? In a system where Basim's stamina is limited and open combat is deliberately punishing, spending energy just to delay the inevitable isn't just inefficient, it turns a perfectly good parry into a waste of both time and a skill point. Finally, we have the latest entry, Shadows. With the two protagonists, Ubisoft try to give us the best of both worlds. We all know this, so let's get to the point. First, let's talk about Naue and the Vault skill. The game portrays it as a stylish shinobi move where after deflecting an attack, you leap over the enemy to get to their backside and make them vulnerable. It sounds cool on paper, but here's the catch. The enemy is already vulnerable just from the deflect itself. Vaulting over them doesn't automatically change the state of the fight, it just adds a flashy animation that takes longer to execute, and unless you've invested into very specific follow-up skills, you're basically doing acrobatics for no real advantage while other enemies are lining you up for hits. It's style over substance, pure and simple. Then there's the legendary samurai Yasuke and his war kick. This is Ubisoft's attempt at a "This is Sparta" moment in feudal Japan, as Yasuke delivers a powerful kick that pushes enemies back and deals a bit of damage. But remember, Yasuke is a walking tank. He has some of the highest raw damage and most brutal weapon sets in the entire game. And it's the same problem again. Why would a master of combat spend energy repositioning an enemy when his entire kit is built to erase him instantly? In a game that's supposed to be about efficiency whether through stealth or raw force, these skills feel less like meaningful options and more like filler in a skill tree that didn't need them in the first place. And that brings us to the end of the video. With that being said, I'll see you in the next one. Till then, subscribe and goodbye.